20 years is a long time in the world of high fashion. Hemlines rise and fall, trends die and are reborn, and apparently the razor-sharp bite of Runway magazine dulls just a teeny bit. Nearly 2 decades after the original film was released, The Devil Wears Prada 2 brings back Meryl Streep, Anne Hathaway, Emily Blunt, and Stanley Tucci for another strut down the cinematic catwalk. But while the outfits are undeniably fabulous, the magic of the original feels noticeably frayed at the seams. Fans hoping for a straight-up legacy-style sequel may not be satisfied here. The filmmakers have clearly chosen to reinvent rather than rehash old ground. However, this quickly gets abandoned after the first 30 minutes, and the rest of the film caves into legacy sequel territory that may have just bitten off more than it could chew. The film picks up in an unrecognizable media era from when we were last here. Traditional print is on life support, forcing a slightly leashed Miranda Priestly to fight to keep a dying Runway magazine relevant as she stares down making the next move in her career. Considering the first film was released 1 year before the first iPhone was, it's fair to say that a lot has changed since we were last here. Meanwhile, her former assistants have carved out formidable paths of their own. Emily Charlton has risen to the top of the powerful luxury empire over at Dior, and Andy Sachs is now an established award-winning journalist who just very publicly lost her job. While the shifting tectonic plates of high fashion force Andy back into Miranda's orbit to help salvage the magazine, the stage is set for a clash of ideals. It's a promising premise that taps into the harsh realities of modern publishing, but unfortunately the execution does stumble. Now, the biggest issue with The Devil Wears Prada 2 is that it fundamentally fails to work as a direct sequel or a true continuation of the story that we loved. Instead of a natural progression of these iconic characters' lives, it feels like we're just watching entirely different people who just happen to live in the exact same universe 20 years later and, run into each other. There's really no need for all 4 of them to be on screen at the same time, apart from a good old microdose of nostalgia, and with a cheap cash grab sequel, I could have accepted this, but it just feels almost at odds to offer this up here. The genuine emotional attachment and character growth we experienced in the first film are glaringly absent here. Andy's journey from a wide-eyed outsider to a principled writer is just really awkwardly glossed over to justify getting her back under Miranda's thumb. I mean, why does this character still want Miranda's seal of approval 20 years later after everything that she's accomplished? Why would she help Miranda do this after everything she put her and the rest of the interns through over the years? It all just feels a little bit hollow, sacrificing character logic and the hard-earned lessons of the 2006 film just for the sake of getting the band back together. Rather than carving out a fresh identity or giving us new biting dialogue, the script does rely heavily on the nostalgia trap. Now, I will preface this by saying there are 2 classic lines that are new, and they are both in the trailer, so it's not a spoiler. Emily, and they're both from Emily. I'm sure you know the first one, "May the bridges I burned light my way," which is just quite classic. And "Can you just suppress a feeling?" So look, there's just no shortage of re-quoted one-liners desperately trying to remind you of how good that first film was. Florals for spring, groundbreaking, might have been a cultural reset 20 years ago, but consistently winking at the audience with non-stop callbacks in 2026 feels more like a cheap Supre knockoff than haute couture. Sure, some things have changed. Miranda has to hang up her own coat now. She has a HR rep follow her to meetings to interject when she falls back into her traditional ways, but we've seen this before with characters trying to make it work in the 2020s, and it didn't do enough to justify the existence here. Now look, everything changes when we talk about the performances. In particular, Streep, Hathaway, Blunt are all reliably solid. They could easily play these roles in their sleep at this point. with Blunt clearly having a blast, barking orders in Italian, including a hilarious argument with Donatella Versace that showed just how much fun the actors and fashion industry were willing to have and get in on this sequel. They just aren't given enough fresh material to make this outing feel entirely necessary. Sure, it is nice to see the core four back on screen together, but a little bit more justification would have gone a long way. The rest of the fashion industry showed up this time around. Most importantly, Lady Gaga pulled double duty, both as a fashion icon and pop star who has one of the most memorable scenes in the film with Streep, and a performance that just lifts the story just as it's getting a little too serious. Now, it is always fun to see these titans share the screen, and the costume department deserves every accolade coming its way. However, The Devil Wears Prada 2 is a classic case of style over substance. It's a breezy, passable reunion that trades genuine storytelling and emotional connection for hollow callbacks and recycled jokes that really don't do enough to justify its existence. Sure, the film attempts to have a lot to say about the state of journalism, the impending death of the print media industry, but it just doesn't do enough to make a statement and talk about, how it could be saved or the potential future, how Miranda, how Runway could adapt. There's so many things that could have gone into this that would have given the film something to say. Unfortunately, it offers it up and then tosses it aside for nostalgia's sake. Fans of the original will wear this like a comfy cerulean sweater. The rest, this may not be for you. I'm still giving it 3.5 stars. I know it sounds like I was really, really negative, but I think when you understand just how good the first film is, the cultural impact it had, and it's so difficult to watch a legacy sequel. So I'm going to stop talking. That is The Devil Wears Prada 2. It is in cinemas now. Again, I do apologize that this is late. I've been very, very sick the last few weeks. So I do want to try and see Prada again before the rest of the summer movies hit us like a freight train. Speaking of, very, very soon, maybe even in one of these boxes, you'll be able to watch my review of Mortal Kombat 2 and a whole slew of films coming your way for the next few months. If you haven't already, please give me a like and a subscribe. I am trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. I've got a long way to go, but we will get there. Thanks again for watching. I'm Lethal, and I'll catch you on the next one.